why do you experience anger? What's the purpose? What's the value? What's the benefit to you of experiencing anger? Or what's the benefit of experiencing fear? I mean, if you notice, you probably react to those a lot, right? Like they probably drive your behavior, but why do they exist? And I think a lot of the time we just make assumptions about that. We haven't really considered it. And that may or may not work out well. So I'm going to propose some things to you. I'm going to propose that um, these emotions are really there as a primitive navigation system to help you with your survival. So it's basically just about survival. And again, this is just a model. You can like it, not like it, but it has utility. So I'm proposing that happiness is an emotion that is designed to move you to take action towards something that you perceive on an unconscious level increases your likelihood of survival. And anger and fear are emotions that are designed to cause you to take action in regard to something that you perceive reduces your likelihood of survival. And sadness is a little bit of an interesting one, and it's never been as clear to me as the others, but here's how I've come to understand it. I think sadness is really about causing you to take stock of what's really important for your survival. I primarily am thinking that it would make sense to focus on fear and anger because I think those are the ones that most people struggle with the most. Although I suppose happiness could be a problem. Most people don't really perceive happiness as a problem. And but it is there's a lot of value in taking a look at that as well. And sadness, some people do struggle with sadness, but probably not nearly as much as fear and anger. So I think we'll focus primarily on fear and anger. My understanding is, and I don't know if this is actually true, but I think that the majority of human babies at birth are typically only respond negatively to a few things. Like I've heard it said that it's like loud noises and falling are the two main negative things that provoke negative responses. And so it makes sense. Loud noises and falling both could be perceived as threats to one's survival. So it would make sense that kind of straight out of the womb, there would be this wired in response to perceive those and react with either fear or anger. But then over time, what happens is that we start to associate many other things as potentially being threats to our survival. So it's not just loud noises and falling, but then it could be particular expressions on a face. Could be particular movements. Could be certain numbers, right? Like you see a certain number in your bank account, and maybe that you're like, I'm not going to survive. That doesn't happen when you're newborn, of course. That comes over time, those associations. And the amazing thing is that there's no limitation to what could be associated as a potential threat. So it doesn't have to make logical sense. And this is why people get fearful and angry in response to an enormous diversity of stimuli. And it's not everybody responds in the same way to the same things, right? So you could have a person could have a look on their face, an expression on their face, and some people would respond to that with anger. Some people would respond to that with empathy and love, right? So it's not that the expression itself has any inherent meaning. It's just that there is an association that's formed. And so a lot of the time, I think we're accustomed to just indulging our emotions, or we learn another strategy, which is to suppress our emotions. So a lot of the time, initially, we just indulge fear and anger. Makes sense, right? I mean, we don't really know any other way. So if we feel angry, then we hit or kick or bite or scream or something. And if we feel fearful, then we run away, or we pee our pants, or something like that, or hide, or freeze. So, however, over time, we might learn that even that's not safe, right? Uh, so we get socialized so that if you're told, don't hit and kick, don't scream, don't bite, and if you act in that way, then guess what? Somebody bigger than you might behave in an angry way toward you, and then you realize, oh, okay, don't do that. Not safe. Not safe to express anger. Maybe not safe to express fear either, right? Like there are a lot of social situations in which it's not perceived as safe to express fear. You have to toughen up. So we learn to suppress. So initially, we just learn indulgence, and then over time, we learn suppression. And I'm sure there are times and places for both of those strategies. Well, let's take a step back. So I said that fear and anger are both uh, responses to perceived threats to survival. But why would we have these two different responses? Why not just one? Why would there be both fear and anger? And here's what I'm going to propose to you. That anger is when you unconsciously perceive that there's a threat to your survival, and you believe there's a calculation that you might be able to overcome this. So anger is moving toward, right? Anger is it's aggressive. There's a moving toward something. So there's a sense that, okay, this is a threat, but I can overcome this. Whereas fear is, this is a threat, I cannot overcome this. So then with fear, you have these two possible responses, because then there's another calculation. Can I escape from it? If so, I'm going to try and avoid it. If not, I'm going to freeze, because that's my best next bet. It's like play possum, because if you cannot outrun the predator, then freeze. It's from an evolutionary perspective, that's what has allowed survival, is if you cannot outrun the predator, freeze. So these are very primitive responses. There's a threat. If I can overcome it, I'll experience anger. If I think I could overcome it. And if I think I cannot overcome it, then I'm going to experience fear. And if I think that I can avoid it, I will attempt it. And if not, I'll freeze. So all of those could work short term, potentially, if you've correctly identified a threat, right? So there's a lot of conditions there. If you've correctly identified a threat, maybe short term, those strategies might work. However, a lot of the time what's happened is that we've registered threats that are not even real threats. And this is where it becomes problematic. So a lot of the time we're experiencing all these emotions, these negative emotions, the fear and anger in our lives. Somebody gives us a look, we get cut off in traffic, we don't have as much money as we think we should have. We don't like the smell of the food, whatever. I mean, there's any number of things can happen, and it triggers in us this sense of there's a threat. And because most of us don't have not up to now had this understanding of this model that I'm presenting to you, we usually didn't know anything other than, well, I guess I can either indulge it or I can suppress it. That's all I've got. And a lot of the time, what's happened is So the indulgence is bad. It's problematic if it's not a real threat, which most of the things are not real threats. This is why, like road rage is not helpful. If you didn't know that, then now hopefully you know. But like road rage is a real thing. Somebody cuts you off, and you can experience, if you've associated that as a threat, then you can feel this surge of anger. And if you don't know any other way of dealing with that, then other than indulgence, then you're going to act that out, and that could cause you a lot of problems. Even like you could end up killing somebody else. You could end up killing yourself um, at, by acting out or indulging that anger, because that's what the anger is there to do, right? The anger is there to overcome the threat. So there's a threat. So imagine that I'm being attacked, physically attacked. Somebody is trying to kill me. Anger could be useful potentially from an evolutionary perspective. It could be useful if I indulge that, because that could allow me to attack the attacker and maybe overcome them. It could save my life. This is not the only strategy, but from an evolutionary perspective, that has proven to be useful. But if somebody cuts me off in traffic, where's the actual threat? There is none. There's nobody trying to kill me. It was just, somebody wasn't paying attention. Somebody was just, concerned with whatever they're doing, and they're not paying attention to me. They don't care or whatever, but nobody's trying to attack me. But if I'm perceiving that as a threat, then I'm experiencing the same anger as though somebody's trying to kill me. And if all I know how to do is to indulge that, then I'm going to act in really stupid ways, right? I'm going to, do the stupid things that people do, right? Like I'm going to floor it, and I'm going to go and I'm going to cut them off, and I'm going to flip them the bird, and I'm going to, do all the stupid things, because all that I know to do is indulge. On the other hand, maybe I learned through some way or another that indulgence is not effective for me, that indulgence is actually dangerous. So maybe I learned when I was a kid, I would act out my anger, and then mom and dad would slap me, and I realized, okay, that's not working for me, so I have to do something different. Or maybe I didn't learn that until I got convicted of some crime related to indulging anger. And then I had to go to some kind of rehabilitation. I had to go to anger management classes and whatever. And maybe at that point, I realized, okay, this is not working for me. So I need a different strategy. Well, maybe that's in some ways an improvement if I then learn suppression, because suppression of anger could be better than indulgence of anger in many cases. However, it's not a great strategy either. So it may be an improvement over an indulgence, but the problem is that if all I know how to do is to suppress, then that becomes internalized. So now I've got this fire raging inside that's doing all that destruction inside of me. It's not acting out outside anymore. I'm not kicking people and hitting people and destroying people's property and things like that. But if it's suppressed, then it's now internalized. So all that destruction is taking place inside. So socially, it will improve my situation, right? Because I'm much less likely to go to prison if I'm suppressing anger than if I'm indulging anger. But much more likely to get, like colitis or acid reflux or chronic back pain or, all these kinds of things. So indulgence and suppression are the two main strategies that most of us have learned, but wouldn't it be nice if there were some other things that we could do?